All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We take a look at great theories of everything in particular, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, theories of everything that have inspired me and that I'd like to share. And today is our 524th video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. So I must think it's pretty important. But the reciprocal system of theory was first articulated by Dewey Bernard Larson back in the 1900s. Well, that's when he lived. He died back in 1990. In 1959, he proposed his two fundamental postulates, which kind of introduced the reciprocal system to whoever was paying attention. Not too many people, I don't think. But then from there, he derived his theoretical universe. Basically, if his postulates were correct, his universe would look like this. And then he wrote books kind of comparing his theoretical universe with the so-called actual universe of the legacy scientists. And we've gone through many of his different works, including his deductive development, where he basically derives this theoretical universe. And also Nothing But Motion, Beyond Space and Time, which is primarily on metaphysics, philosophy, religion, psychology, biology. Nothing But Motion is pretty much atomic physics. We looked at a little bit of his astronomy work. We looked at his book on chemistry, Basic Properties of Matter. And we're just getting started right now with his book on economics, one of his two books on economics, which is called The Road to Permanent Prosperity. So Larson is able to take his theory and plug it into wide-ranging subjects. And basically, his first postulate is where he articulates the original viewpoint that the universe is composed entirely of one component, motion. Okay, motion, not matter, not energy, but the universe is composed of motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. Okay, so that's why they call it the reciprocal system. It's the reciprocal motion is the reciprocal relationship between space and time. Basically, all of our scientific entities, scientific quantities, are forms of motion, and they all can be expressed with fractions that with time or space as the numerator and space or time as the denominator. Now, one of our basic scientific entities that we would not really argue that isn't a kind of motion is speed. The runner is running at 10 miles per hour. 10 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Space over time. Speed is space over time. But that also applies to all other scientific entities. Now, we also would not disagree that acceleration is a form of motion. Acceleration is space over time to the second power. I dropped the rock out the window and it fell at 9.8 meters per second per second. It's 9.8 meters of space in 1 second per second of time, second squared. Space over time squared. Now, go back to the speed idea. The runner was running at 10 miles per hour. Now, say you want to double the speed. Now you can say the runner is now sprinting at 20 miles per hour. 20 miles of space in 1 hour of time. But equivalently, you can also say that the runner is running at 10 miles per half hour. You can half the time, which is the same as doubling the space. That is a reciprocal relationship between space and time. And so if you don't remember your math very well from middle school or whatever, a reciprocal is basically, the reciprocal of 3 is 1/3. The reciprocal of 3/2 is 2/3. You basically just flip the fraction, and it's reciprocal. Two reciprocals, when you multiply them together, they equal 1. So that's how you get the reciprocal. Now, also, when Larson is referring to motion, he is specifically referring to what you call scalar motion. Later in his life, at first, he didn't use the term motion. He used the term space-time. Then he changed it to motion. And at the end of his life, he didn't change it, but he began to at least think of it a little bit as just not motion, but change. Change in 3 dimensions. So that's really what we're talking about, is a universe of change, which harkens a little bit back to things like I Ching, the ancient Taoist Chinese I Ching, the book of changes. And that also does have a kind of a 3-dimensional component with its 6 hexagrams. But that's probably a topic for another day. But Larson began to think of it as change in 3 dimensions. So that kind of speaks to what he's talking about with scalar motion. Scalar motion is a more generalized kind of motion, a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no specific direction. You can envision a scalar motion using a balloon. If you put dots on the balloon with a magic marker, and then you blow up the balloon, all of the dots will be moving away from each other. But they won't be moving in any specific direction. They'll just be moving out, away from each other. Every dot will be moving away from every other dot, meaning every dot is moving in every direction. And so too, if you contract the balloon, all of the dots will be moving toward each other, but in no specific direction. In Larson's system, there are basically like 4 kinds of motion. You can have a translational motion. You can have a vibrational motion. You can have a rotational motion. And you can have a rotational vibration. But if you have a scalar motion can encompass all of those different kinds of motion. And so it's a flexible kind of motion that you can put into kind of your theory, and it will be able to have great explanatory power. Okay, now it's interesting to see then how Larson applies his universe of motion to a social science subject like economics. Now, we are in chapter 2 of this book called The Scientific Approach, and we're, halfway through this chapter. And in this chapter, the first chapter is the introduction. He just kind of talks about the theory a little bit. But then in the second chapter, he's talking about the scientific approach. And one of Larson's bugaboos is that he dislikes the economic approach because they use what he calls a sociological approach, where they are, basing things on things other than science, things other than facts, more like opinions. Like, I like this theory because it is less oppressive, or it is, more equitable. And Larson is kind of like, if you build a bridge, the bridge, if you're going to build a bridge, you need to, kind of construct a blueprint that's based on the laws of science, or else your bridge is going to collapse. And he's saying the same is true about economics. If you build an economic system, your economic system is not going to work if it is built on, your personal, political, sociological viewpoints. It has to be built on science. And, one of his basic iron law of economics is work or starve. As human beings, we, and I don't know that I absolutely agree with that iron law. The world is pretty abundant. I know that you have to pick the fruit off the tree and stuff. So you do have to do some work. There's no doubt, I would say. But, the Protestant work ethic and all that, that might be for later. But anyway, his iron law is work or starve. You have to produce something. You have to do some work, or else you're going to starve. And so that's kind of the bottom line for him. Okay, now we're going to take over here in toward the end of Larson's chapter 2, the scientific approach. In economics, these weaknesses of theory and practice are so obvious and of such long standing that they have become a cause of anxiety in professional circles, according to a news report of a meeting of the American Economic Association speakers. At that meeting, the reporter says, were disturbed by, quote, the inability of economists to arrive at a deeper and more reliable understanding of the functioning of national economies. Despite the continuous increase in the elegance and complexity of economic analysis, or to discover workable solutions for the key problems of the day, end quote. Some members of the profession have arrived at the conclusion that these shortcomings are impossible to overcome. Knight, for instance, renounces all hope of the kind of success enjoyed by physical science. I must say, he tells us, that prediction or control or both do not and cannot apply in a literal sense in social science, end quote. Such appraisals of the present status of economics coming from within the economic profession itself confirm the contention of this work, that a basic change in methods and procedures will be necessary before satisfactory progress toward our economic objectives can be made. If this were some field of abstract knowledge on the order of paleontology or non-Euclidean geometry, interesting that he uses that that example, but paleontology or non-Euclidean geometry, we might well view the situation with equanimity and leave matters in the hands of the profession immediately concerned, trusting in the principle that the right will prevail in the long run. But in a matter so vital as to our personal welfare, we cannot afford to take this philosophic long-range view. The present-day comforts and conveniences of which we are deprived by the inefficient utilization of our facilities under the handicap of unrealistic theories and policies are gone forever. One of the conspicuous features of economic theory as it now stands is its fragmentation. In general, economic thought has developed independently in the various areas involved, without any kind of a common denominator. And as a result, the theories in the different areas not only lack the mutual support that would be achieved by a better integration or continuity of the theoretical framework, but are actually contradictory in many cases. For example, James Tobin reports that, quote, the intellectual gulf between economists' theory, end quote, theory of the values of goods and services and their theories of the value of money is well known. He seems to have an extra set of quotations here. I think this is all the same quote. Quote, the intellectual gulf between economists, oh, that is a possessive. That's just one apostrophe there. Or okay, start over. For example, James Tobin reports that, quote, the intellectual gulf between economists' theory of the values of goods and services and their theories of value of money is well known and periodically deplored, end quote. This is only one of many such contradictions. Because of this lack of a comprehensive basic theory, the theoretical viewpoint of the modern economist is a mixture of valid ideas and concepts with others that are totally or partially wrong, each individual economist having his own special assortment. And since the economic profession as a whole has no better criterion of validity than the individual, it all too frequently happens that the valid ideas of an economic theorist are the ones that are rejected, while the economic community embraces the erroneous theories wholeheartedly. For instance, Keynes's appraisal of the results achieved by wage bargaining between workers and employers, which are essentially correct, is rejected by most economists, while his concepts of the multiplier, which is completely erroneous, is almost universally accepted. We in the United States, by virtue of many factors, some for which we can take credit and others that are largely fortuitous, have been able to develop the world's most efficient economic system. It is now now remember Larson is writing here back, I believe he originally wrote this book in the 60s, but he might have revised it a little bit later. Again, he died in 1990, so it's at least 35 years old. I would say more like 50, maybe even 60. Okay, it is now our responsibility to make that system work smoothly and to devise whatever improvements are required to keep it abreast of changing conditions. The socioeconomists have thus far been unable to provide us with the information and theoretical background that we need in order to carry out this responsibility, but we cannot justify accepting this defeat as final. We have at our disposal more efficient methods than those which have thus far been applied to the task, and the primary purpose of this present work is to demonstrate that by the use of these methods we can accomplish our objectives. This is the background against which the proposal for the establishment of an independent economic science is being advanced in this work. The questions that need to be answered, questions as to how the economic system operates, what causes the various difficulties to which it is now subject, what measures are required in order to overcome these difficulties, and so on, are purely factual questions. The methods described and utilized herein, those that the scientists call scientific, are unquestionably the most efficient means thus far devised for handling matters of a factual nature, and it is the contention of this volume that inasmuch as the need for improvements in the handling of these economic questions is obvious and acute, the mere existence of more efficient and powerful techniques is a strong argument for applying them to the factual aspects of economics. This suggestion does not conflict with the objectives of those who agree with Alvin Hansen that, quote, economics must, in a sense, become a branch of moral philosophy, end quote. On the contrary, splitting the present mass of diverse material into a factual economic science and a socio-economics would strengthen their position so far as the portion of the subject matter remaining in the sociological classification is concerned. It is the attempt to apply economic ethics to matters of cold and impersonal fact that creates confusion and impedes progress in the economic field. Unquestionably, the most important economic problem now facing the United States is the matter of unemployment. Not only because employment is the originating force in the economy, but also because elimination, or at least reduction, of unemployment is a prerequisite for solution of many other economic and social problems. Just as an aside, Larson's other book on economics is called The Road to Full Employment. So, that's just for reference. That other book that he has on economics is particularly about the unemployment problem. The analysis of the operation of the economic system carried out on the scientific basis described in the foregoing pages has revealed, however, that employment is governed by a set of natural laws and principles that are independent of those that govern the operation of the exchange system. The entire unemployment discussion, including the definition of the employment laws and principles, has therefore been separated from the remainder of this report of the results of the investigation was published in 1976 under the title The Road to Full Employment. Okay, so apparently he wrote that book in 1976 and this one at a later date, somewhere between 1976 and 1990. The mere fact that the employment problems can be dissociated from the other aspects of economic life and subjected to independent analysis is a clear indication of the vast difference between the findings of this factual scientific study and the conclusions that have previously been reached by orthodox economic methods. Present-day economics regards unemployment and inflation as merely two aspects of the same thing. In fact, almost all of the proposals for improvement of the economic situation that are currently in vogue, aside from those which would make work at public expense or attempt to solve the job problem by reducing the labor force, plan to accomplish their objective indirectly through inflationary stimulation of business activity. We know how to reduce unemployment by raising the aggregate demand, but we do not know how to do so without creating unacceptable levels of inflation. That is a quote from Heilbronner and Thoreau. A critical investigation of the employment situation by means of the scientific methods and procedures outlined in the previous pages shows that these authors and their colleagues are totally, and we may say tragically, wrong in this respect. The scientific analysis carried out in this work reveals that employment and business stability are fundamentally separate and are governed by different principles. There is no necessary connection between the two. In general, the high level of business activity that results from inflation favors a high level of employment, and unfavorable business conditions are normally accompanied by increased unemployment. But the relation is indirect and, except during extremes of the business fluctuations, is uncertain. A large amount of employment may exist when business is enjoying a substantial degree of prosperity and prices are rising, as experience has clearly demonstrated. Conversely, our analysis shows that it would be entirely possible to maintain full productive employment during the worst business depression if the appropriate actions were taken. The dilemma that the nation now faces, according to the almost unanimous judgment of the economists, the necessity of choosing between the twin evils of inflation and or unemployment, is thus wholly imaginary. Factual analysis shows that the current stage of the business cycle is not the determinant of the amount of unemployment as accepted economic theory asserts. It is merely one of many factors that affect the true determinant. As brought out in The Road to Full Employment, there are many possible economic actions that have the same effect on employment as the inflationary price rise that the economists now regard as the only weapon in their arsenal. And since most of these alternatives have no inflationary effects, the employment program can be completely independent of the business stabilization program. With the help of the information provided by a factual economic science, we can have both full productive employment and business stability. Okay, that is the end of Chapter 2, The Scientific Approach. Tomorrow we'll be getting into Chapter 3, which is called Economic Objectives. And I think this is a very long book. I think it has like 27 chapters or something. I think we're going to read about the first 6 or 7 chapters where Larson lays down the meat of his theory and the basic, how he applies his universe of motion and his reciprocal relationship to the economic system. And then he has a little chart, a flow chart about how the economic system works. And I think that's in Chapter 6 or 7. We'll probably do that, those chapters in full. And then from there on, I will probably just be going from my notes or my quotes from the kind of the high points of the rest of the book, because then he has a lot of chapters that are, about, I wouldn't say minutia, but just kind of more detail-oriented things. And he reiterates his points a lot. So I don't know that we're going to, cover the entire book word for word. I think we're going to do some excerpting. But I think we're probably, for the first 6 or 7 chapters, we'll probably go word for word and then go from there. Okay, well, I think that'll be it for today. Please tune in tomorrow so we can check out Chapter 3, Economic Objectives. And, if you'd like to send this along to the current administration or you know, the future administration about, you know, fixing the economic woes in this country without going up to 9% inflation or, you know, 9% unemployment. You know, if you have any tie-ins with those people, you know, send this video along. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.